Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Developer Interviews. This week we're checking in with Andreas Juliusson. He is the community manager over at Fast Travel Games, developers of Apex Construct. Thanks for joining us, Andreas. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's getting late here in Sweden, but that's, we're used to that, so it's dark outside as well.
It's dark outside.
It's 4 p.m., but it's dark, yeah.
I just brewed my first cup of coffee, so we're on totally different time schedules right now.
Yep.
Yep.
We are.
well, listen, man. Let's dive right into this. I gotta say, I checked out Apex Construct again today. I love nothing more than diving into that world and seeing what you guys have done since the last time I played it. And every time I go into the world of Apex Construct, I'm reminded of how great it feels. And you can just tell that there's a lot of experienced programmers over there at Fast Travel Games. Who is Fast Travel though? How did this all come together? You obviously have experience in the video game world, but how did Fast Travel specifically come together?
Yeah, it's actually, you talked about experience, and that's really part of it. There were in 2016, the founders of Fast Travel, they knew each other from the industry. They all had past experiences at DICE. One of them was actually at DICE at that time, and they decided to basically fulfill a childhood dream and start their own company. And at that time, VR was still sort of up and coming, but they all agreed that you can do stuff within VR in terms of immersion and realizing a fantasy that you couldn't do in flat screen gaming. So Eric, which is our creative director now, he was actually the design director for Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and that was the last game he released at DICE before getting together with Christopher, who's our CTO, and then Oscar, who is our CEO. And they founded Fast Travel Games almost 3 years ago with a mission to bring proper gameplay and proper game experiences to VR, and really start from the scratch in the VR industry to learn as we grow. And then,
how big is the team now?
We are 13 people.
Wow.
We have a few interns as well, but there are 13 of us full-time employees.
And is that roughly the same number of people that developed Apex Construct from start to finish?
We are a few more now, since we have, we moved offices because we actually outgrew the old office where Apex was constructed. I think we were around 7 or 8 or 9 towards the end, 10 actually towards the end of Apex Construct, and now it's a couple of more people coming in for the future now as we learn from Apex and start making other games as well.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, here we are. The game launched back in February of last year, and here we are in January of 2019, and you guys are you're still delivering huge updates. You're delivering content updates and gameplay improvements. I can only assume this is coming from listening to the community and getting their feedback and working with them. But you're obviously very committed to your game.
We are heavily committed to it. I mean, this is a game from the hearts of the creators. Really, it's we love the world that we managed to pull off. We love the universe of Apex. We also knew that when we released it in February, it wasn't perfect in any way. It was a good game, absolutely, but we also saw so much room for improvements, gameplay-wise, visual, and also content-wise. I mean, Apex Construct is a single-player sort of narrative-driven action adventure, and that's what it is at its core. But we also wanted to sort of explore the bit more competitive nature of VR gaming. And as we believe we have a very qualitative bow and arrow experience in the game, we felt that that's something we have to sort of build upon and try things. And that really, releasing the first game in VR, I think all studios have to do that to understand, what the do's and don'ts are and what the players' expectations are. And as you mentioned, I've been in touch with the PSVR community for over a year now. It's an amazing, vibrant, and thriving community. Even if it's on YouTube or Reddit or Facebook, there are so many passionate people who want, to give their say about our game, which is awesome.
They're very vocal.
They are vocal, outspoken,
Yeah,
and they're
we
also
love them.
yeah, and they're creative. I mean, they really want, if they buy our game, they really want it to improve and to be what they dream of it to be. So we have actually, as you mentioned, we have patched Apex Construct quite a few times now. Over the last few weeks, we made two patches actually for PSVR. One who was just released, which is a major update to a lot of the stuff that the communities have asked for. And of course, the Signa Cup Challenge, the competitive sort of free DLC, was released before Christmas. So yeah, we're actively working on improving the game and learning of the process as well.
Yeah, I finally checked out that most recent patch this morning, and every time I walked up to a computer terminal, it was really nice to not have to type in the words open or dir, all these DOS commands. Don't get me wrong, I loved the immersion, and I loved that you were trying something different with the original release. But just typing in VR maybe isn't the most natural feeling.
No,
of all
it
time.
isn't. I mean, we have had actually players coming. Contacting us now and saying, "Why did you do this patch? I love the DOS commands. You should force players to actually have to type because it's so immersive." And we now give the option not to actually manually type everything. You can use short commands or you can use a ray pointer. So I guess VR gaming today is very much about preferences and options when it comes to how you move around in games and how you interact with things, which is tricky from a development standpoint because there is no sort of standardization yet. In many elements of a game, you have to offer options so that each and every player can find the way that they want to experience. But that said, the terminal interaction is probably the main thing I think that the community has been very vocal about, since it's quite a big part for any completionist who wants to find all the secrets and understand all the lore in the game. You have to interact with quite a few terminals in the game, and if you don't like typing on the computer, but you are a completionist, we're actually forcing you to have a few tedious moments. But with the latest patch now, you can interact with terminals in a much quicker and seamless way, which is something we picked up quite early on, but now we've been able to update the game with this feature.
Speaking of secrets, Desert has a sneaky suspicion
I know
that there are hidden DOS commands in the game, and I feel like you might have fueled his suspicion a little bit. Are there hidden DOS commands? Are there hidden files in these things that are not listed?
I think I actually confirmed that to him on Twitter when he actively asked us, please tell me, I can't take this anymore. And I said, well, yeah, keep trying.
Keep trying. You're not going to divulge any secrets today? No, without Parole exclusive?
No, but, a few things in the game can come in handy.
Okay.
And I'll leave it there.
Okay.
For Desra to sort of solve that riddle.
I'll pass that information on to Des. He'll be racking his brain for like the next year trying to figure this out. So listen, there's as far as movement's concerned, I gotta say that moving around the environment today felt better than it's ever felt. You guys definitely pushed the movement speed up like through the roof. I'm a full locomotion guy through and through. I want to use smooth turning and full locomotion as much as possible at all times. Oh, and I was just blasting through the environments. I was like, this feels amazing. It feels better than it's ever felt. Because obviously I've been playing Apex since day one. And it feels good. And even your teleportation mechanic, I just feel like it's very simple, and the combination of both of them work great together.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, initially, in the early days of VR gaming, there were a lot of talks about nausea and players actually feeling sick when moving around in VR. So Apex was, to be fair, constructed with teleportation in mind back in the days. Then, as we went into hot production, we quite soon realized that players are expecting to be able to move around. And we looked at our world and say, this is a world you have to move around in. If you are one of the players who have no problem with free locomotion, why shouldn't we give the option to freely move around in the the shattered future that we build up. So and as you said, we patched and improved the free locomotion aspect of the game. And today we actually have data that says that 52%, I think, was the last time we checked, of our players in Apex Constructs are actually using teleportation, and 48% free locomotion. So it's almost 50-50.
Wow.
Which again shows that you have to offer options. You can't just settle for one controlling method.
Well, something we've seen over this holiday season, the past few months, is such a huge influx of new PlayStation VR gamers, and with that, I think a lot of people are diving in for the first time and being like, oh, how we see this comment all the time. How do I overcome motion sickness? And of course, the answer is just patience, right? Take your time and go through it slowly. So
yes.
I'm assuming that you're going to see a lot more teleporters now than ever before with all the new PlayStation VR owners out there.
Most likely, I would say. And I was one of these guys in the beginning. My very first PlayStation game was Here They Lie, I think. Another horror game.
I loved it, but man, if there's a game, it's that and Robinson that always seemed to make everybody sick for some reason.
Yeah, exactly, and it made me feel sick. But I stuck in, so and I said to myself, I have to be able to experience VR the way it should be in my perspective. And now today I can play anything. I'm actually probably the number one free locomotion QA tester here in the office, because we have a few people who just can't stand it still.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
That's how it is.
Listen, so kind of following up on like that huge influx of new PSVR gamers, I basically have two questions for you as far as giving people options. The first, and I was really surprised to see this, that so many people are diving into PlayStation VR and they refuse to buy Move controllers, which I found shocking. I was like, because I think a lot of people feel like Move controllers are the absolute best way to add immersion to your game.
Yeah.
And so you have all these people, obviously, compared to the PlayStation 4 community, like the PlayStation 4 proper community, the PlayStation VR segment is so much smaller, and then you're segmenting that even further with people who only have a DualShock 4 or people who only have Move controllers. So were you ever tempted at any point to add DualShock 4 support, or are you supporting the 3D rudder when that comes out?
So speaking of DualShock first, I think from a commercial standpoint, I guess it would make sense, because it's you're sort of cutting off probably more than half of the PlayStation VR owners by not offering a DualShock support. However, we decided quite early that our way of making VR games is to take VR very seriously, and not in a boring way, but to realize whatever you can do in VR in terms of interacting with the world. We decided again very early that you have to have hands in our games, because there is some kind of connection when you have hands and actually move stuff in VR that you cannot get in flat screen gaming. And you couldn't really get it by moving around with the DualShock controller in VR. So for that reason alone, we never considered a DualShock support for launch. I think the way Apex is designed is if you play it, you probably understand that it really requires two hands to interact with the world, or to pull the string back on the bow and fire it away, or bring the shield up in front of you, stuff like that. So all these things that we believe is critical for the top-notch immersion in VR wouldn't be possible with a DualShock controller. So I would love to have a DualShock support, but it just wouldn't be the same game. So we decided to go full on hands.
I totally agree with you, man, and I think you did. I think you made the right choice as far as the game's concerned. And when I was talking to Paolo last week about the Wizards, and he kind of turned me around on the whole 3D rudder thing. I was like, if I'm sitting down on my couch, I don't think I need a 3D rudder, because I have a DualShock 4 in my hand probably. But he's talking about dual wielding, spell casting while traversing the environment at the same time. Something you really can't do with two Move controllers unless you're amazing, which I guess I'm not. So are you considering? How with the 3D rudder, I'm assuming that you'd be able to, shoot arrows and strafe at the same time, which is something that I haven't really mastered. Are you looking into the 3D rudder?
We are monitoring the 3D rudder, and it looks like quite an impressive piece of peripherals. But for now, we're not actively working on it. We have a lot of things going on in the studio at the moment, and we're also working heavily to improve Apex Construct from what it is today. So that said, absolutely, we'll keep monitoring the 3D rudder for the future. But we don't have any current plans to support it for Apex Construct.
Okay. And as far as you mentioned, from a commercial standpoint, it would probably make sense to implement DualShock 4 support.
Yeah.
Also, this, and I think I already know your answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. There's games like The Invisible Hours and Keep Talking Nobody Explodes have actually gone, and even Here They Lie that we just discussed, have gone non-VR, to open their game up to the widest audience possible.
Yep.
I'm assuming with Fast Travel's commitment to VR, that's not something you'd even consider.
I think we actually had long discussions about this as well. We went into the VR industry to make VR games. But we also have so much expertise and creativity in the studio. So, a good game idea comes first, and VR will always comes first for us. But I won't say that we will never ever make a flat screen game or, a flat screen version of Apex, even though that's unlikely, because Apex, I think, is a quality game because it's in VR primarily. Then the gameplay mechanics is great as well. But it requires a different kind of approach, I think. You need to remake the whole gameplay, really, if you're going to release it as a flat screen game. But for the future, we are absolutely, looking at the flat screen industry as well and see what we could do. But VR is our priority, and that's where we'll focus on going forward.
Good. That's what we like to hear, man. Especially PlayStation VR from our perspective, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is this. I think when people hear the words post-apocalyptic in games, they automatically think about something like Fallout. Everything's burnt out and
yeah.
and so when I went into Apex Construct, I was expecting something very similar to that. But I found something that was different. I feel like the world of Apex Construct is desolate. It's somber. It's got a somber tone through the whole thing. It's quiet, and there's more of in my book a sense of hopelessness, because unlike a game like Fallout where you actually walk out into the world and you find other survivors, like this is you don't really run into anybody else.
Nope.
This is so and on top of that, like it's not that burnt out Fallout world. It's very colorful, and it's kind of like a jumbled mess. And Desra's favorite thing is that there's a working traffic light, working street light that's just like sticking out of a wall. It's working.
Yeah.
Like where did the inspiration for this new kind of post-apocalyptic world come from?
Well, our creative designer Eric Odeldal, he reads a lot, old science fiction novels. He watches a lot of science fiction movies as well, and as you said, the feeling of being completely alone in the world is something we really wanted to nurture in the game. But again, to what you said about Fallout and other sort of wasteland apocalypse, where everything is just torn apart or shattered or destroyed, we wanted to actually make another take on that setting. And, without spoiling too much of the story in the game, because I think the story and revealing the story, understanding the story is quite central. But there's been an occasion in the game that we call the shift. And what it means, I guess it's for players to find out, but it doesn't mean that the world is broken or destroyed. It means that the world has changed suddenly in weird ways. You could argue, like buildings being twisted, and apparently all organic life except you are gone somewhere. And then of course you have the AIs who lead you through the game and try to get you on their side. But this is our try to make a sort of a unique take on the post-apocalyptic thing without being too generic, I would say. And I think, as always, you could find things that actually say something philosophical or whatever you want to call it, but there is lore there for people to unravel, especially if you're a completionist and you go to those DOS terminals or whatever, and you find about how the world looked before the shift, and also what actually made the shift happen, and where are all the people, and why do we have an AI called Father who apparently wants you to do something in this, and is there hope? Is there hope to actually get back to the world? There's a lot of stuff a lot of questions that we try to put forward in a subtle way.
Yeah. So bouncing off of this, this whole feeling of solitude and the whole the feeling of hopelessness, it feels a little bit strange that your first big content update for Apex Construct was the Signia Cup challenge.
Yeah.
It's like here's this desolate, sad world where you're all alone, and now here's an Olympic event. Like and suddenly, intersplicing a multiplayer aspect with online leaderboards. Where did this idea come from? Why? And I don't want to speak too negatively about something that you gave us for free, but I personally felt a little disappointed. I was like, oh, here's something they've been talking about and touting for a while, and then when it got here, it was kind of a shooting gallery, and a good shooting gallery and a competitive one, but it felt a little shoehorned.
No, I see what you mean. There's a lot of players who've been asking for a story expansion as well, and it's something that we have been toying with. I think the idea of actually doing Signa Cup challenge was, one, we knew that the bow and arrow gameplay is good in the game, and we wanted to do something more with that for the players who are not as or doesn't enjoy a single player narrative driven experience that much, but maybe want to be a bit more competitive and try to hone their skills, like practicing and getting up on leaderboards, stuff like that. We just actually, before we sat down here now and talked, we just ended an online cup that we did, the Signa Winter Cup for PSVR players, who had tremendous engagement. So I think there is an interest in adding, or for us at least, to add a different kind of mode part to actually learn from it. I mean, this is the first time we do a competitive mode in VR. It's the first time we do an online leaderboard with whatever that means, getting the PlayStation IDs connected to our backend and display it in the game in sort of real time displaying. All those things. It's like we have to do it once to understand what you can do with it going forward for our next games, etc. So as you mentioned, it's free. We never considered charging for this mode. We did it for the players who are competitive in nature, and we did it for ourselves so we can understand and gather player feedback on it and see, how can we work with modes like this going forward. What should we do? What shouldn't we do? But then, of course, people want more of the actual narrative or the lore or experience in game.
Partway through the game, I feel like the game kind of turns a bit into a wave shooter level, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And it was definitely a huge spike in difficulty. Now, I know some people had a more difficult time with that than others, but is this something you've been hearing from other people, or is it just from us?
No, it's not only from you guys. It's from a lot of players. That's why in the latest patch last week, I think, we tweaked that level, so it's actually easier now than it has been before. So probably have more players surviving the dreaded level called the Device, which is the one you're talking about, where you stand on top of a tower and sort of defend the tower from dogs and robots coming at you. No, it's a very specific level in the game. Most levels actually have you exploring some combat here and there. You interact with the environment and you solve puzzles. But this is a very, like you mentioned, it's sort of like a wave shooter level in the game. It's the only one that we made in this way, and it feels a natural role in the narrative when you play the game. But it was a bit too hard. We saw a lot of the data also said that we saw a lot of players drop out from the device because they couldn't finish it. Some players actually got back, to previous levels and gathered RP, radiance points, which is like the XP in the game, and upgraded their arrows or shield or bow to have a better chance of surviving. And that's we always encourage players to do that, but you shouldn't have to. So in retrospective, it was too hard. It's been fixed now. So try it today, and you should probably survive it.
Well, I was one of the players who said this is too difficult, and I went back and I played multiple older levels and right. gained RP and leveled up. And I actually figured that this was an intentional roadblock. You're trying to tell the player something. You're trying to tell them, hey, go back. This is how the game is played, and leveling up is all part of the experience.
Yeah, maybe not to the extent, to be fair, that we saw players do it. But absolutely, that's been our communication to players as well, who's contacted us and say, do you have any tips to how I can do this level? It's like, yeah, well, there's always the option to go back to your safe house, pick an older mission from the mission map, and replay that, get some XP or RP, and then level up the equipment, and then piece by piece, you will have a better chance of survival. And that's still the case. I mean, this is it's not an easy level today, but we have increased the survival chances and made the enemies hit you a little bit less harder.
Okay. So I've got to ask something that I've been really curious about, and something that's actually been coming up in the comments lately as people are, curious what happens behind the scenes here at Without Parole, and how we interact with developers. So I've been really wanting to ask this for such a long time. So you're the first person I've ever asked.
Oh, exciting.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like Des and I just did an episode about Apex Construct not that long ago. Why we love PlayStation VR. We did a half-an-hour review discussion, and at the end of our show, we rated it. I know I rated it a 2, which is good on our scale. It means it's maybe not for everybody, but it's a very quality game, and if it's on sale, you should definitely check it out. I desperately wanted to give it a 1, which is the best rating we could give it. This is something that belongs in everyone's library, but I couldn't, just because I knew that there were elements of this game that were just not going to speak to everybody. Mm-hmm. I have to ask, when a developer hears feedback like that, or hears a rating that's anything less than exemplary, do you guys take it in stride? Do you say, oh yeah, we agree with the criticisms, we agree with what they're saying, or do you guys go out and riot in the street? Like how do you respond to all this?
No, we go mayhem here in the office. It's like we're trashing all the computers, and
obviously
throwing paint at the walls and all. No, it's as long as the critique is fair, it's fine. We have had some reviewers, I won't mention it now, but it's quite apparent if you look at the quite many reviews we have on, for example, Metacritic. There are some who just doesn't like VR, for example, and it's the critique they often give is like, well, this is the medium you're criticizing. This is VR as a way of playing games that you're criticizing, and not our game. Or, for example, PlayStation VR, even though the move controls are great, sometimes the tracking can be a bit suboptimal for some players. With the camera, the one camera that you have, is also out of our control, really. We have to work around it, of course, but it's stuff like that is a bit harder to digest, I would say. But if the critique is fair, that's fine. And I think you've been very fair in your critique. I don't think Apex Construct was a perfect game at launch. It still isn't a perfect game, even though it's getting close to being the full realization of what we want to do. But I actually have a question back to you, which is, there are two, well, probably more, but the way you reviewed this game, or the way you just motivated the fact that you didn't give it a 1, because you saw parts of the game that other players might not expect. That's a bit uncommon as well to hear, and I fully respect that. usually you see, or sometimes you see reviewers saying, I love this game, so I'm going to rate it a 10, no matter what anyone else says. But then some other reviewers take your stance of actually looking at the bigger picture and saying, let's look at the ones and zeros as well, and not only the heart, which is interesting, I think, as it's just different ways of looking at reviews. So, and it's become very clear to me as well. We have had a lot of reviews. I think we have over 70 reviews by media outlets and a bunch of consumer reviews as well. That it's interesting to see the consumer reviews and the reviews made by people who only care about their feelings of a game. And then you have the more sort of serious outlets who are looking at VR and the industry and what this game offers that it, and what it doesn't offer, but it should have. So long answer to your question, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at reviews as well. Like, critique is cool if it's fair and if it has the stance that you guys actually have in latest episode. It's all good. There's no mayhem in the office.
Well, from a personal perspective, when we do our shorter reviews, I think it does come across as more of a personal perspective. You're like, I love this game because blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But when we do the 30-minute review discussions, we want to let people know if they should be buying it or waiting for a sale or what the deal is. But from a personal perspective, I love Apex Construct. And every single time I drop into that world, I go, man, I just want to spend more time here.
That's awesome.
So that being said, what's next for Fast Travel Games? Are you going to do we stay in the world of Apex Construct? Do we make a sequel? Do we explore a new IP, or do we just keep patching this same game to death for the next 2 years?
No, I can. Exactly what we're working on today, we are not ready to disclose. But that said, the post-launch experience of Apex Construct has been overwhelming, I would say. It started out okay on PlayStation VR back in February last year, but we have had our best moment in December this year in terms of both in-game engagement and sales.
Nice.
So yeah, which is awesome. And there is a demand of getting more of Apex Construct in some shape or form. So that's one of the things we are exploring at the moment. And then we'll see where we end up with that. But it's we don't feel that we are done with Apex Construct. I think you finished the game. There is a lot of unsaid things. There's a lot of potential in expanding this universe, and it's absolutely something we want to explore.
For sure.
It's not a promise that there's going to be a sequel, but it's not impossible also. So we will see, I think, over the next few weeks and months, actually, where we end up. But we also have other projects in line that we can hopefully start revealing, I would say, over the next few months or so. Quite exciting ones. But I'm sorry I can't say anything today because it might end up not happening, and we are also depending on other things. So, but we have a very healthy team here in Stockholm. We have a lot of creativity going. We have so many lessons learned from Apex Construct. I think that we're just dying to go back into production and take all these learnings, what to do, what not to do, build our next game for free locomotion and teleportation from the ground up, stuff like that. Localization, for example, has been another huge request from the community. Apex Construct is only in English. So there's a bunch of stuff that we really, really want to do for our next game, if it's a sequel or if it's another game derived from what we learned from Apex. And also, we're not done with Apex. We're going to keep improving the game. We haven't released the last patch yet. We're closing in on the 1-year anniversary for Apex Construct 1, which is awesome. And engagement initiatives like the Signia Winter Cup that just ended today will keep doing those things as well, just to stay in touch with the community and gather feedback and make sure that whatever we release next on PlayStation VR will be take all the good parts that we did with Apex Construct and improve on all the things that weren't perfect from the start.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Andreas, thank you so much. Congratulations on all your success over at Fast Travel Games and with the success of Apex Construct. And make sure you stay in touch with us so we can.
Sure.
We always want to know what's coming next, and we always, of course, want to inform the community as well. But we'll be keeping a very, very close eye on whatever comes next from you guys.
Sounds good. And I guess at some point I have to give the secret away to Desra. Otherwise, he's probably gonna go mad. So
at some point, I saw him last night. He was losing his mind already.
Well, I'll let him stay in it for a little longer, and we'll see.
Cool. I'll be looking forward to watching him dive further and further into insanity.
That's awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, Andreas.
Thank you for having me. Take care now.
All right, so that does it for the second episode of Without Parole Developer Interviews. Obviously, we want to thank Andreas and all the people over there at Fast Travel Games for taking the time out and talking to us a little bit about their game. This is never in a million years something I thought I'd be doing. But also, I want to thank all of you. Looking through the comments last week, I saw nothing but positive reinforcement, encouragement, and that's sometimes the only thing keeping me going. I can't wait to see where the series goes and who I'll interview in the future. But mostly, I'm just glad you're all along for the ride. I love you all.